Welcome to the Moon Baby Magic Podcast, a space to honor women's rites of passage stories. From menarche to menopause, the initiations of womanhood all live within our wombs. We are here to reclaim the sacredness of all of them. I'm your host, Natalie Elliott, birth keeper and women's coach specializing in womb wellness and hormonal healing. Ready for slow and sacred storytelling? Let's dive in. Hey, women, welcome back. Thanks for being here. Hope everyone is entering into this sort of really interesting season, right? Because it's like we're entering into winter starting on December 21st, which is like the utmost yin time of the year. And then at the same time, we are entering into holiday season, and the energy tends to sort of spike a little bit. So just sending you all a lot of love on navigating that. I feel like this is a really important time of the year to honor our bleeding bodies. So actually like really resting very deeply when you bleed. And I have been on my bleed for a couple of days. And I've just been like laying in bed and listening to music and kind of just like staring at the ceiling and being with the music. And yeah, there's just really not much to do. Something else that's been on my mind lately that I want to share in this podcast intro, in case you don't follow me on Instagram, you can find the link for that in the show notes, or get my newsletter. You can also sign up for that in the show notes with the womb cycle playlists, is the sister wound and this idea of jealousy. And I think it's important to share about on this podcast because sometimes we hear another woman's story, and if we haven't healed our sister wound, or if we don't generally feel that we are whole and complete exactly as we are, we might hear another woman's story and feel just like a lack, or perhaps a jealousy that rears its head as this not enoughness. So I'm just going to read from my newsletter. Yeah, and it says that one thing that often comes up in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle is the inner critic. This phase is her home. I once had a spiritual teacher tell me that if you have a strong inner critic, you just need to shut that down immediately. I don't actually agree with that and don't think that's how it works. Here's why. Our inner critic speaks with our best interest at heart, but it does take some practice to actually hear what she's saying and take the feedback without spiraling out into not enoughness. The key is to remember that you are already whole and complete. You are not broken. You are enough. If you can reach this place within yourself, you are ready to meet your inner critic. And if you are willing to hear her, to decipher her message, she will be your greatest ally in creating the life of your dreams. So, how do you know if she's speaking to you? Take a look at the women you find yourself comparing yourself to. This often happens in the luteal phase. Notice when you feel jealous of another woman, what she has, what she's doing, who she is. That's the inner critic, utilizing other women to send her message. Some might call this the sister wound, and it totally can manifest that way, but it doesn't have to. Here's the difference. Jealousy manifesting as the sister wound might sound something like, oh my God, look at her. She's so embodied in her spirituality and her business is thriving. She has 3 beautiful children and is married to a solid man, and they just bought a homestead. God, she speaks her truth so fearlessly. Ugh, I could never be like that. It's just not for me. I should probably unfollow her because really this just doesn't bring me peace. I don't need to see it. So not that this has ever been you or me, right? So what's the alternative? Jealousy brought to conscious awareness and transformed into expansion and sisterly love might sound like this. Wow, look at what she's been through and how she's transmuted her pain into such power. She went from rock bottom to having a life that she loves. If she can do that, I bet I can too. You know, I'd really love to be more fearless in speaking my truth. I'm going to keep up with her so I can be in that energy. And wow, this is actually really illuminating me, my desire to have my own land. That's good to know. So, do you see the difference? Right? Nothing about this woman you compared yourself to had to change. You didn't need to tear her down to feel better about yourself or your circumstances. Rather, you were able to draw inspiration rooted in being genuinely happy for another woman. You cannot have sisterhood any other way. You cannot have strong sisterhood if you do not believe you are worthy and capable of your desires. And that's really what this podcast is here for, to bring you all these stories of women who are actualizing their desires and who have been through tough things and have chosen themselves. And if you're not there yet, it's okay. Remember that sometimes this doesn't really start with you. The sister wound is most commonly rooted in the mother wound. And whew, I know this is getting complicated. But I do want to say if that you'd like to explore this topic deeper, it is what our call in the Cyclical Living Circle is focused on this month. So you can join us this Friday, the 13th, December 13th at 12 p.m. Eastern, if you'd like to get in on the discussion. And you get a week free in the membership. So you might as well join and see how you like it. Yeah, so let's get on to this amazing episode. Today on the podcast, we have Joslyn's inspirational story of how she has come to truly trust herself. You'll hear about how Joslyn has wanted to seduce life from a very young age, as well as how her seductress archetype, who she's named Emily, both served her liberation and how Joslyn knew it was time for her to get out of the driver's seat and step into her high priestess self. This episode is just packed with raw truth, deep dives, and so much sweetness and wisdom. I know you're absolutely going to love it. Remember that all the links for anything I've talked about, including Jocelyn's Instagram, the Cyclical Living Circle, my Instagram, is all always in the show notes. You can check it out there. And let's hear the episode. All right, Joslyn Love, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to just kick us off by sharing what phase of your cycle you're in and what phase of life you're in.
So I'm definitely the person that looks at the moon to see where I am in my cycle
Mm,
and consistently is always tuning in with my body, like my heat, like any signals of like, discharge change, smells, changing in my yoni, all these different really important ways that, we could learn where we are in our cycles. But it always tends to be a guess, right? Like I know there's like a way to track through all the moon cycles, writing it down, journaling, which I've done. And I tend to then just go back to the moon and back to my body. So I think right now I am in the midst of what they say your follicular and ovulation,
mm,
where I'm definitely feeling like that, like to life again. Like I'm just like going into nature and like getting out of my cocoon because I just bled maybe like over a week and a half ago.
mm,
Um, and just definitely knowing that like since the moon is just past the new moon, that I'm probably going to start ovulating very soon. I've been bleeding on the half moons. So, mhm. Or maybe even just a little bit less than a half moon.
I love that. I love tracking with the moon. And I feel like it's sometimes for me, like I do basal body temperature and all of that because I'm a nerd about it and I love it. But I also think that sometimes like the moon is more accurate of a guide for me. I'm bleeding on the full moon right now, which is like quite an intense cycle to be on. Um, and it's funny. It's like no matter what, even if I ovulate like a little later in the month than I thought I would have, it's still the full moon that my bleed comes. And I think it's so beautiful and magical as a woman to track your cycle along with that because you can just look up at the sky.
Yeah. And the more we do look up at the sky and look at the moon and see like, wow, like there's something here. There's like a message. There's a
Mhm.
pattern, right? Like, I mean, it's a consistent cycle. And I can also tell when my bleed is changing when I've bled on a different moon cycle, or it's just, I'm like, whoa, like I could feel myself moving with everything around me. So it's really beautiful.
I love that. Yeah. And it just,
Feeling that sovereignty in these moments because I didn't answer what part of my life and that I'm in as well, the cycle. So that sovereignty cycle.
yeah. Mm. Yeah, I think too, it's like it helps you be in a slower pace of life when like you're just noticing these like subtle energy changes. Um I find that it's really beautiful for me to every once in a while I take a break from like tracking my cycle with like an app or a chart or whatever. And it's really nice to notice the more subtle ways that my body changes. And I sometimes have women ask like, what are some of your telltale signs besides like cervical mucus that you are in a different phase of your cycle? And it'll be funny things for me. Like today, I really deeply entered my luteal phase and I'm like I even posted this on Instagram. I'm like driving to a meeting and I was like, ugh, like I just want to like stop this car and write poetry about my it's like such a deep, soulful phase of the cycle, and it lends itself to wanting to sort of like exist in your moodiness and like love that part of yourself.
Right? That like when the veil is thin, and also honoring it, that like, wow, we're so powerful and we're like very, we know, like we
Mm.
have a knowing, and to know our knowing and to trust our moods and that they're speaking to us because they mean something is like really powerful. And just those like moments when we feel like our body just sink in. I love it. Yeah. The luteal phase is one of my favorites.
Really?
Mhm.
I think a lot of women that come on this podcast say that too. It is my favorite. It's my favorite because I feel the most powerful and the most like me. It feels like sort of all the masks that can sometimes pop up in those like lighter phases of the cycle, like in follicular ovulatory energy, they're just gone and it's just raw me.
Heck yeah. For
Yeah.
sharing that. Mm. Can
Well,
I ask you a really quick question? I
oh
know
yeah.
we're here for me, but
Yes, ask me a question.
I'm always interested when, it comes to like those who are just like women like us who are doing this powerful work. And sometimes I can't tell how young we are or how old we are,
Mm,
whatever you want to say, like what our age group is,
yeah.
including like zodiac signs and stuff like that. I know we were talking about the moon, and sometimes when I've like tracked my cycle, I've also tracked the zodiac with the moon to see if
Mm.
when I'm like feeling certain things, if I've like aligned with that energy field.
Oh,
you know
interesting.
it's interesting. But I'm just curious, I want to like know what your sign is. I could share
Yes.
mine too, and like your age group and stuff. I think it's so beautiful to yeah, like weave that. Like I tend to think a lot of womb women, healer, medicine workers are like a lot older than me, and
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Oh, it's so fun. Yes, I'm 28. I just turned 28 in October, so I'm a Libra.
yeah.
And my moon is in Capricorn and my rising sign is Virgo.
Oh my God, why are we sisters?
Wait, tell me yours now.
I'm turning 28 in January. I'm 27, and my moon is in Capricorn. And I'm a Capricorn sun as well. So I'm a
Oh,
double
wow.
cap. I was born on a new moon.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
That's so cool. I love that. I don't meet
Yeah.
other women who have like strong Capricorn placements, actually.
Mm.
But I love it. I feel like it, because Capricorn, it can be sort of construed as like more of a masculine energy. But what I really love about it is I feel like I'm a very grounded person who like can make things happen on this earth and not always live up in the like spiritual ethers. And
Hmm.
I feel like the Capricorn really comes in with that.
Totally. I'm right there with you. I'm like,
Yeah.
wow, I've actually had a pretty easy time manifesting in my life, and I'm really thankful for that.
Yes, so true.
Ooh,
Oh,
it's a
I
blessing.
love it. Beautiful, beautiful reflection. Um, yeah, switching gears a little bit, I like to get into first bleed stories. And before we were recording, you were saying you have a good story. So I would love for you to share what you remember, what wants to come through about that.
Oh. It just makes me want to laugh, actually.
You could laugh.
Oh my God. There's been so many times, where I've been doing womb work and, with, in these trainings and with my teachers, and they're always like, you know, we find out a lot about ourselves when we talk about our birth story, And when we talk about our first bleed and like all these different rites of passages and like how they've shaped us, our the things that we love and also our wounds. And um, I think it's just so interesting. I've been coming to this topic a lot on first bleeds, including because I want to work with young, beautiful beings who are coming into their first bleed and make it more of a celebration for them. I'm actually
Yeah.
planning something with a close friend of me and my partner's
Aw.
and her daughter who is excited for her first bleed. But going back to mine, all I remember is I had a friend. She was a close friend, and she was usually one of the people at my age in fourth grade who grew a lot quicker, like was a lot taller, was like a lot stronger, who was like her hormones were just everything was like in her body a lot quicker than a lot of us.
Mm.
And she left class crying and like screaming and bleeding. And I was like, oh my God, I want to bleed. And
Wow.
I was just like, I don't know why. It just felt like one of those things where when I saw my friend go through that, I was like, I want to cry. I want to bleed. I want to like have that much attention on me. Like I want to feel like I'm exploding in the middle of everyone and just like come tend to me and also at a young age I was in a family dynamic with my parents that I didn't feel like I had enough attention. So anything to bring me attention was like something I wanted.
Yeah.
Definitely one of those things. After that happened, I was going through this part of my life where I was faking having my bleed, where
Wow. Oh,
yeah.
I need to hear about that.
where I was just so much wanting to have that attention of like being like having a bleed at a young age for some reason. And going to the doctor, like the nurse in the school, in elementary school, and being like, I think I'm bleeding. And they would give me a pad. And obviously I didn't have anything happening, but it was just like me like almost faking it because I just really wanted more info. Like I felt like my parents were not the type of people who would share with me
Mhm.
proper sex education, what it is to have your bleed, the sacredness of it, how it's actually supposed to be very like beautiful, like welcoming into your life,
Mhm.
sometimes painful depending. But I just remember yeah, just totally being so excited, but also like totally faking it.
Oh,
and
I
then
I always want to give everyone's inner little girls hugs. I feel like I say that on every episode. I'm like, oh, I just want to give little Jocelyn a hug because it's like
she
you
needs
were
one.
just, yeah, like giving her a hug because we experience these rites of passage, in with the lens of whatever like our culture around us and our family and the culture in the outer worlds is. And I think it's hard as a young girl that like you want this information, but it's very awkward to ask for that information when you're a coming of age girl. And so I feel like the girls, like you were saying, you want to work with these girls, they need that. They need someone to like come in and tell them without them asking because they're not going to ask.
Yeah. They don't know what to ask. They
No.
just know they're gonna bleed and to shove a tampon in their vagina. It's terrible.
No,
Depending though, some parents are actually doing a really great job of having these conversations with their children a lot sooner now, which I really
totally.
appreciate.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, growing up in a family dynamic, I don't know if you know, but I am Puerto Rican and Guatemalan. So my Puerto Rican side of my family had a lot of men who are very machismo, which is what they say,
All
which
right.
is extremely religious, extremely controlling. Everything, you have to cover yourself up. You cannot have men in your life as friends. You have to have your husband. You can only be married to them. If you're being abused, you have to take it. You can't tell people.
Oh,
It's very deep rooted in
that's crazy.
Latin culture.
Wow.
Yeah, so. there is just a lot of shame around talking about sex and being a woman in my family in general, to the point where my mom was like, I don't poop, I don't fart. And I'm just like,
No.
yeah, it's just like just having to really like squeeze yourself into this unrealistic version of being a woman. And so yeah, at that young age of being in fourth grade, and honestly didn't get my first bleed until I was probably like in seventh grade, something
Okay.
like that, seventh or eighth grade. And I
Yeah.
don't remember it much because when it came, it just came. And I
Mhm.
just started, okay, here's your tampon, here's your pad, work with it, and there you go. There was like, if you feel pain, pop pills. I remember my mom giving me like all those pain relieving period pills you get at Walgreens.
Yeah.
And just having to like, yeah, just, sort of mask it. I remember at some point in high school before I got my bleed, I remember throwing up and like just having so much like purging happening, and hearing my friends having all these hormonal issues, popping birth control because they didn't know what to do. And so I think around high school is when like the bleed conversation really started coming up more and more. Um, but yeah, I think,
Wow.
even going back to that fourth grade, me wanting to really have my bleed, that was also the time I was really, um, and I'm not shameful about it anymore. I used to be, but that was around the time where I had little boys in my ear telling me to search porn websites and
Whoa.
to look at sex.
Whoa.
And I was in third grade when that happened. And it wasn't until fifth grade where we had the sex education talk. So there was this whole gap of my life of me just wanting to know about sex, to know vaginas, to know, boobs, and to know like
Yeah.
our bodies. I was so like ready, and no one would tell me, and I would get punished when my mom almost sent me to military school for that,
Oh,
actually.
wow. I didn't
Yeah.
know that was a part of your story.
I should tell my story more.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Well, yeah, I mean that's what we uncover here is like all the different ways that yeah, like I think as young girls, ultimately we are curious. And that's the feedback that and the story that I get from a lot of women who come on here is they're like, part of me was really excited and part of me knew this was a big deal, but then it's like the adults in your life aren't reflecting that back. And so then it becomes, what happens when something that you're excited about sort of gets repressed, it becomes like a shameful thing or something that yeah, that then our psyche holds and we have to later sort of confront when there's space and time for that.
Yeah, totally. And I'm really so thankful we're having this conversation because no one has asked me these questions. And
Oh.
I've never really shared my story in this way. So I think even
Oh.
to talk about it out loud and to really like, wow, like, give my inner Jazzy a hug and just like let
Yeah.
her know that she was totally normal for having these questions. And she was just, if anything, very shameless about it and like willing and brave
Yeah.
versus, the people. I mean, also like there was a part of me who very felt who's from like I think literally in first grade I felt really close to that energy of the seductress. Like
Mm,
I just wanted to seduce life, and
nice.
I was always so interested in, just for no reason, just to see what it would do to me and these young boys around me, if I would show them my nipples behind the bushes.
You were that girl.
I was that girl. And, it's like, yeah, I wanted attention, but also I just wanted to like, I was so, I think at a young age, really like, I had my innocence. And then I also had this part of me that was like so witchy. Like I was just always been like, a good witch at heart and just wanting to turn people on like with life and our bodies. And I don't even know why, I just knew it was fun, and I just knew like there's something about me that enjoyed like like ecstatic living. It was really interesting. I don't do it anymore, but it was just like my younger self having permission to just be wild, just a little
Yeah.
else.
I love that. I love that story. And I think it's sweet to see these themes that showed up when we were younger and like who our sort of like unashamed selves, little girl selves were. I also think, with as women, like our sexuality and our power are sort of intertwined. Like that is a lot of our power is, of course, like our womb center, our sexuality. And it's interesting to think, there's that saying that says, at menarche, a girl meets her power. And so then they say, and through all her cycling years, she practices her power, and at menopause, she becomes her power. And I talk about it a lot in regards to menopause, but it's interesting in this regard to think about it with menarche because it's like, even before you get your period. So first grade obviously is early, but those are those years where like you're leading up to preparing for your rite of passage. And it's like, okay, what is my power? What can I do with it? How can I wield it? Like, what can I do here? And I think that's so normal.
Yeah, yeah, totally so normal. And I've even heard some of my close friends like talk about stories of them like getting to know their vaginas at a young age and not even realizing they were masturbating like in front of their parents at the kitchen table or they're just feeling things and we're just like oh,
That's
like
amazing.
it's different for everyone. Oh my God, I can only imagine. But I think it's
Yeah.
just, yeah, there's a lot of love there. And yeah, just like being able to allow us our younger selves to surrender and also like protect, right? Like I could only imagine as parents, my parents knowing what I know now, we're just like, don't do that, like get it together. You can't do these things, like yeah, there's I including and my parents talk a lot about sex trafficking and they're always so nervous that um
Mm.
yeah, just very much they were always so just protective of me and all of my sisters and all of my sisters turned out very wild, including me and my sister Leah. So yeah, I see the dynamics and also where, there's space for us younger selves to be held in all of our curiosity in a safe way.
Yes, yeah. I think that's the key to be held in curiosity in a safe way because ultimately I think of course what our parents are trying to do is keep us safe no matter what way they go about it. But it's yeah, I mean, man, it's hard. I even think like I'm not a mom, but I have a lot of friends who are moms and just seeing sort of things, it's like, I don't know, I think it's kind of hard to not traumatize them. Like we're all just doing
Mm.
our best.
Oh my
And that's all
goodness.
we keep doing, right? Is like each generation just keeps doing better.
Yeah, I'm just like, I was just thinking about that the other day. I don't think there's a way that we can't not in some way traumatize children.
Yeah.
They're so fragile and
Yeah.
we're so developed and sometimes not. And
Yeah.
so it's just like, um, yeah, I mean, and even if it's just like accidentally giving them, I remember my niece, she was little and I gave her honey when she was very little, and I didn't know that young babies can't have honey because there's
Yeah.
certain bacteria in them that could mess with them. And I
Yeah.
was just like putting it around her lips, and barely gave her any, but my family freaked out, and
Oh.
she's crying, and I'm just like, I think I just sort of traumatized her.
I know there's so many little things.
Mhm.
And even just, like none of us adults are walking around without trauma or triggers or like completely like enlightened, right? Like we all have our things, and at some point or another, that's going to come out. And I think we can have a lot of compassion and grace with ourselves and just know that like we're doing our best. And
Right.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, these things that happen, like, you have sort of these, I don't know what you'd call them, like traumas or what, but certain things that happened, patterns, family dynamics that were harmful for you when you were younger. And like those become our medicine, right? It's like that becomes our thing to transform in this lifetime. Um, but I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm curious. So
Mm.
you sort of pretend to have your period for about 3 years, um, and then you actually get it in seventh grade.
Yeah, I mean, my godmother, she sort of told me at some point when I was pretending to have my period in fourth grade that I just can't do that, that it's like gonna scare everyone, and that,
Oh,
I'm just like lying about it. Because I mean, at some point they just were like, they were like, "You're not bleeding." Like, let me look at your pad, and I was like, okay.
oh.
When I was younger, I did lie a lot because I was always getting in trouble, and I just
Mm,
was living in a fantasy world or trying to, just make something of myself when there was a lot of abuse going on at home.
mm.
So once I sort of, stopped playing that, I just sort of gave it up until I really got my bleed. And when I got it, it was just like not important almost. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah, it's like you almost already had your moment of like revering it.
Hmm.
Yeah. So what are those I mean you mentioned military school. I'm curious where that comes in the story, but I love to ask like what were those early cycling years like? So like middle school, high school, what was that time of your life like?
I think middle school was so fun. I had a really
Oh.
fun time being so young in middle school. That's also when my mother separated from my at the time my ex stepfather. So she was
Okay.
married and then they got divorced. um and I think I just developed a lot more freedom and joy around that time because in her new marriage my father wasn't abusive. My not current stepfather, he was very just loving, and we just would go camping a lot. And all my friends were, I moved schools. I was more in a school that was very like um political, I would like to say. I don't want to like, yeah, just more
Yeah.
political. And I was more, because I had curly hair, looked at as someone who was different and weird. And then I
Ugh,
was in more like biracial school, and it was very diverse, and I had a good time. And so I think from elementary school to middle school, I felt a lot more free, joyful, expressive. And then going
yeah.
into high school, definitely so, but I think high school involved a little bit more bullying because that's when sex and relationships came into play. And me definitely being involved in a lot of dating different people and just being so excited to get out there and to experience what sex is and love and all these things, but then being shamed as like a slut, whore, boyfriend stealer, whatever they say, like all these different things. And just bringing in that like seducer energy again. I at one point found out that there was this energy that was stuck to me that I made a spiritual contract with, and
Mm,
she was this seducer, archetype that basically was trying to teach me what love is, because I at a young age did not feel like my mom would teach that to me,
okay.
because I didn't believe that she knew what true love was.
Yeah.
And so I had to go through this whole energy clearing from this entity that was with me at a really young age, and
Wow.
release all these energy cords I had to my womb, from all these people I had let into my womb for years and years and years and years. And that was
Yeah.
something I had to do last year, that deep clearing. Um,
Wow.
mhm. So I think around those times, uh, there was a lot of womb energy involved, and there was a lot of um, giving away my power to be liked, to be seen, to be acknowledged, because there was a part of me that didn't feel like I was enough. And that I was always like the odd one out because I had eczema and I was always itching, and I had Tourette syndrome at a young age. So I always had like these tics, and these people, would, I had some, my best friends to this day would protect me and love me and support me. But, the majority of people had something to say, and I just tended to be the talk of the town. It
Oh,
was a
yeah.
lot.
I mean, it's like what comes to my mind is like you've just like you've got a big energy. Like, and that's hard for a young girl to hold.
Totally, like, not knowing what to do with her power, but knowing she has it and she wants to shine, but she's definitely, like, choosing a different route, you know? Like, I totally rebelled, and,
Yeah.
my mom was always so protective of me dating, and I was like, "I'm gonna do it anyway, but I'm gonna do it with, like, 10 different boyfriends, and I'm gonna have, like, all these different relationships in high school, and I'm just gonna wild out." And I definitely did, and as much as it was fun at some points and I was able to fall in love like so many different times. Um, and I love that part of myself. I also know I had to step back and I had to refine myself and really step into that high priestess energy, the mother energy, you know, like out of that maiden energy.
Yeah.
Um, I think a lot of my Saturn return, that's pre Saturn return that's coming through in these years, has been teaching me a lot about that. I know you brought up that mother energy, so
Yeah.
feeling a lot of that
Yeah.
active.
Totally. I think that we start to feel whispers of it in our late 20s. It's like, okay, things are changing.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so this like seducer energy, when did you said you kind of did a lot of work on that in the last year? Is that the first time you sort of recognized it?
I recognized it very, very early, like in when my spiritual awakening was happening. That was actually during the pandemic.
Okay.
But I didn't start really realizing the ways that I was still unconsciously involved in that energy until my last two current relationships,
Mhm.
where these really powerful medicine women are like, yo, you're still unconsciously living in that space, but you
Wow.
just don't realize it because, I mean, you know, being secretive or, you know, just like wanting to be friends with people I've once had relations with, even though they don't serve me anymore, and just
Mm,
like wanting to people please, right? It's like that people pleaser who just wants to please and please and please and be validated. And then so it's just me having to almost fast and squeeze all of that outside validation out of my life and like come back into myself has been
yeah.
those recent teachings.
Yeah. I mean, I love learning about archetypes and I talk a lot about archetypes on this podcast. So if you're open to it, I'd love to just like break down this archetype a little bit with you.
Mm.
Like, so this seducer archetype, if you had to give her a name, what would her name be?
She instantly said Emily.
Emily.
Her name's Emily.
And what is Emily after? Like, what does she really want?
You know, I've asked her this a lot of times, and what she really wants is friends.
Mm,
She wants friends. She wants true, loving, loyal, forever friendships.
mm, mm. Wow. And her ways of getting that, like what are the ways that she feels like she has to get that?
She definitely feels like she has to give something of herself or outside of herself, like gifts, buying people things, making people things, singing, glamorizing, like almost like love bombing, right?
uh,
Yeah, she definitely love bombed so many times. Even my own self, I've love bombed my own self into thinking that, you know, certain, I like, you know, self manipulation in a way.
yeah.
Um, yeah, so she was, you know, I've always been a theater girl because I love it. I love to sing, I love to dance, I love to act. But I also think that was also involved with my love bombing of like, look what I could do. And I'm gonna pull you in and, you know, like gift you things and gift you my body, you know, show you how good I feel. Like all these things that were just taught at a young age, including with porn being
Yeah.
involved in my life at a young age, I was always like listening to that voice of having to please, like that I had
Mm,
to be like a sexual pleaser or something. And
mm.
you know, later on, yeah, I was working at the strip club in my early 20s, so
Wow.
all of that was very much involved.
Yeah, so it was kind of like the literal manifestation of this archetype.
Hmm.
Wow. And what I have a couple of questions, but I'll stick with
It's
the art.
okay. There's a
So
lot there.
yeah, there's a lot. And I just really honor you for being so vulnerable and sharing your stories. And I think you're amazing. And so this is really really wonderful for me. So this seducer archetype, Emily, like what is she afraid of?
Hmm. She's, if anything, just more afraid that I'm gonna forget about her because she, as much as I've caused myself lots of different wounds through that archetype, I've also experienced so much life in ways that like my lineage has never been able to experience. Um, there's, she's scared that she's gonna be trapped in like a prison cell through the eyes and the control of relationships of um, people. She's not scared of much. I think that's the funny thing. Like she doesn't have that many fears, which is why she's so out there and wild.
Yeah.
And she's just, I think her deepest fear is that like she's someone's gonna try to like confine her and make her forget who she is and um like trap her from her gifts, because I think there's a gift there. I think there's a gift of being able to teach pleasure, teach about the sacredness of our bodies, and how we can connect with community outside of sexual relations, and like that beautiful intimacy talk. And I think there's just been uh, a lot of that fear coming up of, including in this past year, of me using my power wrongly, and you know possibly like people thinking that I'm someone I'm not, or like
Mm,
maybe even seeing me, like not being able to see my heart,
mm,
like that maybe I might be like using this seductress archetype for yeah, things that are like not supportive to the collective. So that's
mm.
definitely been a fear as well.
Yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. I think that fear of being caged is a big one for a lot of our. It sort of feels like these like maiden archetypes, like whatever our sort of like wounded maiden is expressing itself as. Um,
Mm.
and it's like when we remember that this part of us never goes away, it just gets. My teacher Nancy Lucina says that our archetypes are like Russian nesting dolls. You know, those dolls that like envelop each other and just get bigger. And so like this
Mm.
archetype doesn't go away; it just gets enveloped within the mother. And
Mm.
I love that because it's like we like that adventurous soul within us like doesn't go away. Like she
Mm-mm.
just isn't in the driver's seat anymore, which is a good thing. Um, yeah, so I love thinking about it in that way.
Yeah, totally. There's like this developing that I totally agree with, that it's like integration, right? Like we
Mm.
integrate her into our being without letting her drive the vehicle. My friend
Yeah.
literally just said that the other day. Like,
Aw.
it's obvious when those things are driving the vehicle, and I could actually even tell in my body when they're driving the vehicle because I'm not being myself.
Yeah.
I'm anxious. I'm like moving too fast. I'll tell, I could tell that like I'll start like talking different or laughing different, and I'm like, honey,
Mm.
everything's okay. We don't need to people please. We don't need to, love bomb. We don't need to do any of those things. We don't need to, wear a certain thing to look extra. I mean, yeah, we could be sexy for ourselves, but we don't need to
Yeah.
do it to be liked or to be like liberated in the eyes of a man or a woman. Or so yeah,
Mm.
I could do it for myself.
Absolutely. That's
Hmm.
the real juice there is like
Hmm.
doing it for yourself.
Hmm.
Because it's from a true place, you know? Yeah, and I thank you for coming into this, diving into this archetype. I think a lot of women probably have a seducer and Emily within them too. And so to just know that like we can really name these parts of ourselves and like understand them and love them. I've had a really deep practice of that lately. I feel like, same with me, like Saturn return vibes, strong. And I feel like I've been doing so much work on past selves and just like feeling them in my body, like you said, being like, whoa, okay, that energy is here and she wants to be known. And like, can I just like honor her for a second and appreciate all of these women who I have been because they've all led me to now, like all of our past selves have served us in some way or another. And yeah, yeah. I'm curious to dive in. Like it sounds like your early 20s were a really interesting time. So first, I kind of have a question around the porn thing. So that came into your field, I guess, when you were really young. And what was that like for you?
As I'm talking about all this, I feel like her energy is like very present. Like I could feel it in my eyes, like her gaze and like the way like I could feel like this magnetizing, like, whoa, like what is she doing?
Oh,
I'm just
yeah,
like,
like
okay, honey, we're
face
not
for
driving the vehicle today. We're just honoring all of you and loving you up, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, she's I can almost feel her in like the back of my spine, like back of my head.
Mm,
So interesting.
mm.
Sometimes when I get into that energy, I feel like I have this like ball of fire on the back of my neck and my shoulders.
Oh,
It's like
wow.
it's like this like dragon energy. It's so interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. What was the question? So porn, young
Yeah,
age.
like what was that like for you to be exposed to that at such a young age?
Yeah. um ugh. Even talking about it makes me feel like queasy sometimes. But I, at a young age, loved it. I was like, that looks awesome. And, like I literally, like, there was these, it was so interesting. And a lot of it started because in second grade, like, I would, go behind the bushes and show boys my non existent boobs. They're just like my nipples. And so like the boys would follow me around and they'd wait until I did it and then they'd be like, "Oh my God." And then they would get scared of me and so but then also like loved it. It was
Yeah.
hilarious and I'm like, "You guys are dumb. You have nipples too." Okay.
Right. It's like not that different at that age.
It's hilarious. I'm like, "Your guys' minds are really funny." But I think in third grade when we like in the beginning of the school year, these two boys, I remember their names too. They would come to me and they would be like, search this website. And it like it was like websites that don't even exist anymore. And it was like, I think it was like farm secret farm girls or something like that, or farm secrets .com. And it was these farm girls who were like, and like these outfits and their titties were out and they were just like making these videos, like these porn videos. And from that moment on, I was just like, whoa, I've never seen this. I need to know more. And then so I would search like boobs.com, butt.com, vagina.com. And there was actually these sites that were fully up there at that time.
Wow.
You didn't have to pay for them. And it just brought me into this like whole thing of like, what is this world? Is this sex? Is this love? Is this like how you get people to like you? Like, and it was just something that I really just felt called to in that time of my life. And no one else around me but the boys that were showing it to me would ever talk about it. And so like I didn't really talk to my girlfriends about it or anything. And I actually felt very secretive about it. Like it was like my little secret.
Mhm.
And so yeah, it was just quite an interesting time. And then at some point I had to let it go. And then I think it just sort of shaped the reality of my high school experience and relationships. And I had to deprogram from that for a really long time.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And thank you for sharing that. I know it's probably, like you said, challenging to talk about. And I actually think that even though you weren't talking to your girlfriends about it, that probably a lot of women can relate.
Mm.
I was exposed to porn at a pretty young age too. It was probably middle school, so a little later. But like we are way too young to be seeing that because we can't like make sense of what we're seeing. And so like I heard it when you said, I was trying to figure out like, is this sex? Is this love? And it's like, well, it's a perversion of those things. And we can't understand that at that age. And it's crazy to me that like these things were so accessible then. And thank God, hopefully it's better
Different now.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's not the imprint we need of sex and love.
Yeah, it's not. And even in movies, I mean, if you think about it, it's just like these all these fairy tales that they're showing us at such a young age that shape
Mhm.
our the way we relate to people and ourselves. And so, yeah, sending love to all of those little versions of us
Yeah.
and our innocent eyes and
I
brains.
know. I know. It just like makes me want to like be mama bear over all the little girls.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is one of the most important thing is to protect children from these types of things. But yeah, I'm curious. So you said eventually, you kind of had to stop that. And I'm curious about this time in your early 20s with the strip club and like did things like sort of come to a head for you after some time or like what was this like?
Strip club was liberation for me.
Mm,
It was around the time where I was I was around 21 when I started,
yeah.
and I was getting out of one of the most abusive relationships I had ever been in.
Mm.
I was with someone who wanted to kill me and
Whoa.
who was sort of that clown archetype, if we're talking about archetypes here, who would play like games and jokes and like would like I mean, it was just like a lot of really harmful how do I say it? Like, it's almost like like in a way where it's like they're messing with you all the time and with your head and making you feel loved, but then like they steal your car. But then you don't want to get out of the car. So you're in the car while they're stealing your car and driving it around like a maniac and acting like they're about to kill you. And so, like, there was a lot of me being constrained and just like going through like this process of thinking like that love has to be painful because of my abusive like upbringing. And then I had a friend that I'm no longer friends with at that time who, I already knew I had to leave that relationship and I was gaining my power back, but there was something that I really needed to make sure that I would never go back. And she introduced me to the strip club. And, she was like, this is how you're going to get your power back. You're going to learn how to stop letting men walk all over you. And you're going to heal by gaining your control and by learning how to, how she would say, use them for what they're worth. I don't believe that. But
At the
at
time it
that
served.
at that time, it was helpful. I was so
Yeah.
revengeful. I was so angry, and
Yeah, of
I just
course.
wanted to lash out and, hurt and take control of any man that I felt like reminded me of my ex
Mm,
or any of those things. And it was just like, you're at the strip club and they're doing all these, saying all these things, and you're like, well, you have to give me your money first. And so it's like, and then then it's another unhealthy dynamic being formed that now I'm going to take sexual abuse for money, but
mm,
and having to decondition from all of that jazz. At that
yeah.
point though, it did liberate me. I did feel like I finally was able to like wear sexy things and put on makeup and just like dress up every day and buy myself nice things, where in this relationship with this guy, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to work. I couldn't have friends. And I was always scared for my life. So it was like this, like, I'm free. And like, I'm now like being praised by men. And I'm now like being like, honored and like loved on, but not literally. Like it- I rarely chose to do sex work, and I had a couple times. I didn't like it, and I got out of it really fast. Um, but it was definitely a whole journey that even some of my closest friends, like we would all go to the strip club together. Like it wasn't just me, like I was having my friends also work there with me because it was so easy money, so easy to be beautiful and audition and just like be sexy and young, and that's what they wanted.
Yeah.
So but then just in the, these recent years, I knew, and I would always tell myself, I'm not going to be the person who gets stuck here. I'm going to make sure I have another form of income so I'm not reliant on it, which is why I
Yeah.
started working with my grandmother at her spa, which she
Mm.
has in Chicago.
Mm.
Um, but it was definitely something I needed to liberate myself and to feel loved in that archetype, seducer archetype of Emily.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, then just fully in those recent years, I think the last time I fully worked at the strip club was 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Yeah, 2 years ago in January, so the beginning of
Wow.
the year. Mhm.
Hmm. Wow. I mean, I first just want to say it's like, God, it breaks my heart to hear about women who are in these abusive relationships. And I'm just so sorry. I can't imagine what it feels like to be in a situation like that. And I'm so grateful that you found something that liberated you. And it reminds me of how sometimes in life we have to do these like really big pendulum swings. Um, and then we find our middle ground from there. And it feels like your seductress, seducer, Emily archetype, like needed to be fully expressed in that way, like fully seen, fully acknowledged in a way that felt powerful for you at that time. And then maybe that came to completion.
Yeah, totally. I think last year when I started realizing about like the energy that was, connected to me, and then, like, all of my milestones of liberation, and, you know, then going super deep into my healing work that started with with Delilah when you actually met me. That was like my first yoni facilitator training ever. And that's when I really started switching and letting go of that archetype. I sat with ayahuasca for the first time last year during eclipse season in
Wow.
October. Yeah. And that's when my whole life just went boom, like just fully deconditioning, unwiring all these things that I got comfortable in, and having to just, yeah, fully surrender to a new way of life.
So gosh, how do I want to ask this? You mentioned that in 2020, or like, yeah, during the pandemic, maybe it wasn't exactly 2020, but during the pandemic, you had a spiritual awakening. I think for some women, the spiritual awakening often doesn't begin with womb awakening. What was your experience of spiritual awakening?
So my first experience of spiritual awakening it was I wasn't working at the strip club anymore. I had worked at my first um medical spa because I'm an esthetician.
Mhm.
And I was then during the pandemic, we couldn't work. I had just moved into my first apartment where I'm living alone for the first time ever, by the lake, Lake Michigan,
Aw.
and having the best time of my life. And I wanted to start juicing because I was experiencing a lot of eczema
Mm.
and all over my body, steroid withdrawals from like the topical creams I was being given at the hospitals. And so when I started my celery juice fast and detoxing all these heavy metals from my body, Started doing yoni steaming because for some reason it just felt like something I wanted to do.
I love it.
And I
That was
was,
my like spiritual womb awakening was yoni
yeah, yoni
steaming.
steaming.
It's such an in.
Right? And it felt so good, and I just remember just loving how good my womb felt, and then I'm, like, detoxing, and I'm also doing breath work, and then I'm, like, living by the water,
Mm,
and, all of a sudden, it happens where you're doing all this work, and then, like, before I go to bed, I can hear the underworld.
mm,
Like, I can hear these deep thumps of sounds in the underworld. I can hear like there was paintings falling off my walls, there was candles exploding in the middle of the night, I was being woken up by like seeing things by the side of my bed, and I'd wake
mm,
up and just do like massive energy protective healing and just like say all these prayers. And that was also the time where I was decolonizing myself from religion. And
mm.
so my
Wow.
spiritual awakening did definitely involve also me meditating a lot on my root chakra. So
Mm,
there was a sense of womb awakening
wow.
that I didn't fully see. And then, that was also the time where I started working with herbal medicines. I think the earth is the womb for
Yeah.
me. So there was definitely a womb awakening there. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. I love that. I think for it's interesting. A lot of women I feel well, everyone is different, but I for myself and for some women on this podcast, it's been like my spiritual awakening was probably in like 2017, 2018, maybe 2016. I was in college and I started doing yoga. And my spiritual awakening was really yoga and the chakras and
Mm,
Eastern spirituality. And it was so beautiful. And it like continues to be really the basis of, interestingly, I think like my moral code, like yogic principles, like non-stealing, non-violence, all of that. It's like very much, I didn't grow up with religion. So it's very much my sort of background in spirituality. But the thing about that is it took me a while to get to the womb stuff because that form of spirituality is inherently very masculine. Like yogic spirituality is very
yes.
masculine. And so it was an interesting leap for me to get to feminine based spirituality with the earth and the womb because I was so used to like doing work on my mind and my thoughts and all of that and stillness. And so to get to the like underworld, like raging and yoni steaming and sobbing and like it took some work.
I could only imagine, which it is important. Like I've been having to learn so much about the mind this year and like
uh,
those masculine archetypes and wisdom of like processing our thoughts,
mhm.
breathing, stillness, right? But then there's that our cyclic nature that's like, I don't want to do all that, Let me choose. And like, I want to do this and I want to flow and
Yes.
But then it's like, okay.
I know. Yeah, we do need both. I think the marriage
Yeah.
of both is like the really beautiful union.
Yeah, that union within us totally necessary.
Exactly. Yeah.
And again, bringing in that high priestess energy, which I feel like has been with me all year long, just like,
Mm.
yeah, that integration. hmm Totally.
From the seductress to the high priestess. Mm.
I mean, it makes sense why I love my luteal phase.
Yes, it sure
I
does.
feel comfortable there.
So who is your high priestess? Does she have a name?
Hmm. Oh my gosh, I feel like my high priestess, does she have a name? I have a couple names that are coming up for me. Um, I think my high priestess, her name's Joslyn.
Oh,
It's me. Yeah, it's my
yeah.
my birth name.
Oh, yeah. And that's amazing, right? To just come to
Yeah.
this like this wholeness of who you are. Well, and that leads me to a question I love to ask women once we get sort of to who they are now, which is just who have you become? Like we've gone through so many aspects of your story. Like who have you become? Who are you right now?
Mm. Who am I?
Just asking you the easy questions today.
I know, right? Like, oh God. I'm just like, am I the trees? Um, I am, I think I'm just like, I mean, this is, my own belief. I just feel so faceted and multidimensional. Um, Really quick, going back to that awakening is when I also was experiencing my gifts of
Mm,
premonitions, of being able
mm,
to see things with like my very clear and open headspace, just being able to um, hear things as well. I'm clairaudient and clairvoyant, and how strong my intuition was, and
wow.
the oracle, like the priestess oracle that is within our womb, right?
Yeah.
And I was scared of it for a really long time, and this is the year that I finally stopped being so scared. I've been I was just finally initiated into an Oracle clan in the Academy of Oracle Arts,
Mm,
and where we literally are working with the crystal ball, and
wow.
we're, working with the Kabbalah, the Tarot, Egyptian Netsudu,
Mm,
the Magdalene Rose lineage,
mm,
and just so many of these really beautiful matriarchal teachings that are deeply coming and from earth and sky and stars, and I feel like that's me. I feel like there's a medicine woman within me, that is me, that every time I put my feet on the earth I feel her,
mm.
and every time I listen to sound waves of whales before I go to bed, like I feel her. And when I'm taking a bath and I start singing and channeling, I feel her. And so it's just,
Mm,
um, I naturally feel and also have met a lot of my different past life versions of me and my multidimensional versions of me, which is like octopus, which is, like um, a Native American grandmother. There's
mm.
yeah, like there was even a multi-dimensional version of me that had blonde hair, and she was
Oh,
like more of like a rock star singer girl,
love
and
it.
yeah, so and then knowing like my past lives, the versions of me that have passed away, you
Mm,
know doula and medicine workers and healers
yeah.
and creatives, even mermaid. So like all those parts of me just feeling just fully tended to, embodied, heard,
Mm,
um, trusted. Like I just trust myself so much. And even when
yeah.
things don't make sense, I know that, there's something important there. So I am just fully surrendering. I am fully feeling embodied and held by God, by Goddess in these times of my life. And that doesn't mean all my days are great. Like I've had some of my toughest days, but I think that's because through those toughest days, I've been able to reach deeper into myself. So
Mm.
today was a beautiful day, though.
Yes.
But yeah.
Wow. Wow. When you said like, I just really trust myself internally, I was like, yeah, I can tell. It's like that is just exuded in the way that you speak, in the way that you share your story, in the way that you show up. It's really quite beautiful and extremely inspiring. So, yeah. Wow.
You are also so inspiring. Like, I feel so inspired being here. Just like, I love public speaking. I used to like be so scared of it when I was younger, and used to have like stage fright and couldn't sing in front of people, anything. And once I realized like that fear is a distortion, it's a hallucination, it's
Mm,
not real. I fully stepped out of it, and it's in these one-on-one spaces where things feel just very close that I feel I open up the most. So
mm.
thank you for having this space and creating it and inviting me into it. It feels really special.
Oh my gosh, of course. I'm so grateful to have you here. It's amazing. And I do have one more question that I'll get to. But It's amazing when I have women on because I think I even said this to you before we hit record. I'm like, it's such a gift to me to be the host of this podcast because every single time a woman comes on, I've been really inviting women on. I haven't, I just kind of started opening it up publicly, but mostly I've invited women on. And I know that the women I invite on are wonderful, cool, inspiring women. But then I hear stories and I'm like, wow, you're amazing. Like, that's how I feel after every recording. It's like, wow, you're amazing.
Oh,
It's just like women are amazing. Yeah.
we
So
really are.
I know, right? Like we're just literally the creatresses of life. And
Right?
like dying and being reborn time after time after time, like meeting the shadows and going to the underworld and coming back. It's like, whew, of course, we are very multidimensional.
Yeah, so, so, so much so. And even just integrating like those past parts of me, like something I started doing was modeling, not like with any not signed, but just creating my own projects.
Mm-hmm.
If you scroll down like my Instagram feed, you'll see that a couple years ago I was doing a lot of photo shoots. I haven't been able to do any recent ones, but I honor my body. You know, like I think my body is a piece of art. I think women's bodies are art. We are the art creators. Like without women, like, you know, there would be so many parts of the world that wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
And I just think we're artists, we're creators, we're just these phenomenal, beautiful flowers, and you know, that we just want to smell and rub up on
Mm.
ourselves and just like, you know, just fully just love up on in the most, you know, authentic ways. So yeah, I'm very like I totally agree that women have just some of the most amazing stories. And I've even met women, people even that I've dated, that I'm just like, wow, how are you smiling right now? Like how are you,
Wow.
how are you like living in your body? Like sometimes like the things that the world puts us through is just so dehumanizing and so unforgivable. And
Yeah.
there's just even women that have still forgiven
Wow.
beyond the unforgivable. And
Yeah.
so I'm really thankful that you can give people and you just a voice. And for anyone listening to this, that, yeah, just know that you're so important. You know, we're all so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone has such a sacred story. Well, the last question I always ask is to share whatever piece of womb wisdom that you'd like to leave the women listening with.
It just really goes back to trust. If I've learned anything, it is to trust myself. Um, Even when you're not sure what you're trusting, that there's something that you trust there, because the trust that we have with ourselves will definitely shift the trust we have with the world around us, including, um, you know, me specifically working with plant medicine, you know, trusting the earth, trusting the waters, trusting our animals, even little spiders. I have to learn to trust spiders, like
Yes.
trusting our sisters, the people that we build families with, and it all starts with us. And being able to trust when our womb is saying something, and when our emotions are strong, and when there's, you know, when our body is ill, or when we have a rash, you know, to trust that. Like there's trust that needs to be gained in this journey. And when you don't trust, and when you lose trust, is when, you know, is when we just hurt ourselves a lot of the time, you know, and we lose out on some of the most beautiful experiences. And so
Yeah.
I feel to trust our wombs, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Well, Jocelyn, I'd love for you to share where women can find you, any offerings that feel like they want to come through in the moment and all of that.
Ah, They could find me at my Instagram, which I feel like I'm gonna do like a whole rebirth for soon.
Exciting.
Yeah, I'm just like, that happens a lot where I'll just delete everything and just, you know, come on new, and reborn. So that's at the medicine dot mama. There is a couple medicine mama accounts, but mine has a dot in it. It's the medicine dot mama. I just restored my Instagram so you could actually see it when you search it now. I was being like censored for a while.
Oh,
Yeah. I guess, Instagram doesn't really like when we use words like yoni or vagina or pussy or
yeah.
witch or any of those things. So LOL. It's okay. And then yeah, you can find me at my website, also the medicine slash mama .com. And yeah, I offer a lot of different one-on-one womb services like yoni steaming, ceremonial yoni steaming, and womb massage. In these recent times of my life, I've been loving ceremonial rites of passage work where, whether it's a mama blessing, or even a blessing for menopause years, or, your first bleed. Um, and also, yeah, just working a lot with, babies and working deeper into the realm of doulaship and wellness support, and even just making sure, I don't even know if there's a word for this, but it's basically making sure your rights are being honored when you're giving birth. Right? So making sure that our mothers are being treated respectfully,
Yeah.
and no matter where they choose to give birth, right? Or how. And then, yeah, just also you could, on my website, you could also see that I have my new apothecary called Wild Womb Remedies. And yeah, just consistently sharing my medicine cabinet. I know you do the same, so it's so beautiful, and I'm really happy for the both of us.
Me too. I need to go look at your new apothecary.
Yeah, happy to trade or
Ooh,
even
that would
create
be
something
great.
together. I've always
That would
wanted
be
to
so
collaborate.
that would be so fun. Oh, yes, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Oh, all right, love. Thank you so much for being on here. It's been such an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll talk to you after this. But thank you for everyone listening, and thank you for this time to get to share my story. It's been a blessing.
Thank you for tuning in to the wisdom of the womb today. It's truly an honor to bring these stories forward, and it would mean so much to me if you'd rate and review this podcast so that it can reach even more women. If you're looking for deeper support, you can find the link to book a one-on-one virtual session in the show notes. See you next week.